Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural every Wednesday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We discuss those things that affect our communities, where you have two experts in the legal field, criminal law, immigration, and what's your other trade? Let me stop though. Criminal law and immigration law, particularly, and civil, because we have issues in our community that we need our people representing us. And Speaking Legally gives you an opportunity to hear from two experts who are on the ground every day doing this work, advocating for our people, getting the results we need, both in our African American community and our Latino community. It's important for us to be armed with the proper information so we can make the right decisions and advocate for our rights. So welcome to the show, and I'll let my co-host say hello before we get into quite a bit for today's show. So buenos dias, Edward Pichardo Esquire.
Buenos dias, buenas tardes. I'm Ed Pichardo, solo practitioner, have my own firm. Welcome everybody to our show, Speaking Legally. I hope you find the information that you get here informative and fulfilling. Welcome.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Russell.
Welcome everybody, first-time listeners and long-time listeners. And if you've been following the press today, there's a lot that has to be said. But I want to start off the show real quick before Dr. Grant goes into it. I got this text message that came through today. So that means somebody's watching, but we're going to talk about it. And so let me read the text message. It says, I am outraged by the grand jury decision in the Taylor case. So the tease is that we're going to talk about Breonna Taylor, right? The country's legal system is and has always been racist. Where are our Black leaders? Multiple question marks, right? Where are our Black leaders, right? We're going to talk about that as well. You cannot address these iniquitous acts behind a computer via Skype. Ouch, that hurts right there. I am so blickety angry. So, Dr. Grant, you're going to make sure that we hit each one of those points as we go through, all right?
We're going to hit all the points. We're going to hit all the points. I need to say hi to Kia Daniels Peck. Thank you, Kia, for being here. Richard Russell, you get the attendance award for always being here, watching our show. Thank you for being here. And thank you for, the compliment on my Faithpreneur brand. I appreciate it. So I'm dressed like this today because I just came back from a awesome flash mob in the middle of COVID-19. I tell you, our creativity continues to inspire me. So the Association for a Better New York just did a flash mob in New York City. So here's a little picture. I don't know if you can see me in there, but there are multiple shots. I won't steal the whole excitement, but my girlfriend, Melva Miller, is the first CEO of the Association for a Better New York. And she invited people to come down and participate in this flash mob so that we can be a part of making sure we use these last couple of days to get counted. So that is my census warning. And it's really a warning because we have only this window of opportunity that will affect the next 10 years of our lives. So this is serious. If you haven't gotten counted before, please get counted. Help someone in your community, help the elders who don't know how to fill out the census. It's really simple. You can go right online to 2020census.gov. It's literally 10 minutes to fill it out, if that much. If you are here and you're concerned about, oh my gosh, my immigration status, we have two attorneys here that can tell you the census is supposed to be protected so you can feel safe and secure that no one is going to come after you. But we need to get all numbers counted. So please, you can call in, you can do it online, but we need your response. Time is running out, so we really need everyone to make sure that you get counted. Pass the word, let folks know, and then you're gonna get to see me doing a flash mob. I was on the South Side, so that one I was shouting you out, Ed, while I was out there representing. But we had a great time doing something fun, but also important, and all of us need to get counted. So that's our public service announcement. Now, Lord Jesus, right before this broadcast, the decision came out, and we know that's on top of everyone's mind. And your text message, Mr. Russell, was somebody expressing their disgust with seeing what happened. But here on our show, Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the culture, we break down what you're seeing happening in the news. So not just the emotional response that we get when we look in the media and see what's happening in our community, but now let's hear from our two legal experts just what exactly happened here in this case.
Now, Ed, before we go into breaking down either the elements of what Officer Hackinson was actually charged with, and Sergeant Madley and I think it's Cosgrave, Cosgrove was not charged with. I think it's important that we talk about the cultural first, right? And so, what do I mean? Early on in one of our early segments, episodes, we talked about the importance of being a juror, the importance of participating in the legal system on this level. And being a juror is expanded to being a grand juror, where you sit and you hear cases and you make decisions as to whether or not someone should be indicted or someone should not be indicted. Now, I don't know what the makeup of the grand jury was in Louisville. What I know is my experiences told me is that sometimes in our community, we do not fully participate on that level because we got to go to work. And we have to go to work even though we're working at a job that we hate, or we have to go to work because we really need to go to work. Or we decide to ignore the notice and we decide to do something other than participate fully in the process. So I say all that as another public service announcement to ensure that we fully engage in the legal system. Because when I see the results of what happened in the Breonna Taylor case, 1 out of 3 of the officers indicted, I would like to know, what did the grand jury consist of? Who was sitting in those seats? How did they arrive at this decision? So I'll put that out there and let that marinate, hopefully resonate throughout the show as we continue. So go ahead, Ed.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the pleasures that I had one day when I was working for the Brooklyn District Attorney, I was walking out for lunch one day and I ran into a sister that I knew from political campaigns I had worked on. And I run into her and she says to me, Ed, I'm down here because I'm serving on the grand jury. And I'm like, really? That's wonderful. That's great. What kind of cases are you getting? And she was talking kind of about some of the different cases, not getting into the details because it's those grand jury proceedings are secret, but she was kind of giving me some general descriptions and talking about how she felt lucky and felt wonderful to be sitting there and deciding the fate of people that look just like her. Because for the most part, when you serve on a jury, you're going to see us in that, in terms of those who are being charged. And the culture comes in when you talk about what's believable and what's not. I mean, in this case, yeah, sure. You're going to hear the officer testifying saying, well, we announced ourselves, but why, if so, why did you have such tragic results? And people kind of judging credibility. And if you're from the community and you see these things go on and you have a cultural understanding of what's plausible and what's not, that's where the difference comes in. If you live in a Black community and you're a brother or sister and you hear some of these, what's presented, you have to, say to yourself, wait a minute, that doesn't even sound right, and then, so I don't know who served on this jury. I don't know what's going on that only one of these 3 officers got charged. And by the way, the only officer charged was Brett Hankison. He got charged, from my understanding, with 3 counts of Kentucky Penal Code Section 508.060, which is wanton endangerment in the first degree, which reads under Section 1, a person is guilty of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, he wantonly engages in conduct which creates a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury to another person. And under Section 2, it states wanton endangerment in the first degree is a Class D felony. Okay?
Hold on right there. Hold on
Yes.
right there.
Hold on before both of you get into explaining what he got indicted for, what it actually means, and what happens next. I want to circle back to what both of you just said about serving on the jury. And this is a cultural moment for us to really understand how important it is for jury duty. A lot of people, I included, used to get annoyed when you get the notices for serving jury duty because you feel it's an inconvenience, whether you have to take time away from work or you're in the middle of something important or whatever the issue is. A lot of us have used an excuse that, oh, I don't have time to go sit and wait. But this is important. If we don't have a jury of our peers, we'll continue to see things like this happen. And then we don't have access to the judicial system the way we would like. So this is very important. So that's point number one to take away. Serve your jury duty time. That's your ability to be in the place, to have a discussion, to raise a question like, no, something is wrong here. That doesn't seem right. And we can go back, and these two attorneys can cite case after case of what happened when you didn't have a jury of your peers in cultural cases that affected us and people got acquitted and there were no charges and blah, 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 blah. So if you're guilty before, Ross says, I'm guilty. It's okay. It's a new day. You know now how important it is to serve jury duty. So please let that be a lesson you take away from speaking legally. I don't want that to be foreshadowed with now going into breaking down exactly what was charged. Only one out of the three officers. Okay, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to let you continue explaining, Ed. Sorry.
Well, Ed, before you continue, right? And I'm really harping on the cultural because we can't change what the factual is, right? The factual is 1 out of 3. We're not changing that today with our commentary. Our commentary is probably comments to a certain degree that other people share and may be quick with the fingers and quick with the social media. So they've already expounded on this, but we can speak to the cultural aspect, which is one, having our audience understand that also having a diverse system of attorneys in the prosecution office can also help the ability of getting justice. And what do I mean by that? Having been the attorney for Ramarley Graham, wrongful death in the Bronx, attorney for Kowalski Trawick, and having not seen a diverse group of assistant district attorneys, prosecutors go in and present that case to the grand jury, you can't tell me that didn't hurt the odds or the effect of the grand jury coming out with charges of not indicting. I was a prosecutor. When you're a prosecutor and you're presenting cases in the grand jury, you're in the grand jury every single day, 6, 7, 5, 4 cases every single day. You start to build a rapport with the grand jurors. The grand jurors start to look at you as a person of credibility or not so credible, depending upon how you present yourself. So you can go in there with a robbery case and your tone is different. Your actions are different. How you ask questions are different. And they'll get the vibe that this is really not an important case and that you really don't believe in the case. And so hence, they don't believe in the case. And then you can go in there the next day and you right with it. Your questions are pointed. You sharp. You are like in it as if you're in World War II or fighting against slavery or fighting, your fellow brothers in the project. I mean, like you are in it. And they pick up on that. They pick up on that energy. They pick up on your tone. And then they realize this is something important. And because they believe in you, see, this is where the cultural part, they believe in you, Royce Russell, you, Ed Pichardo. You don't know how many of those people will lean your way. So I don't know who presented the cases to the grand jury in Kentucky or Louisville. I hope they were smart enough, the people in charge, the attorney general, was smart enough to have a diverse presentation, because presentation means everything in most cases. And, if this is where the truth lies, then we'll take it. But I have a funny feeling this is not where the truth lies.
And that's one of the concerns that a lot of people have, because the question always is in these secret proceedings whether or not the prosecution presented the case with all the vigor that they would normally present against these police officers that they regularly work with. You see, because I would imagine these are the same police officers that they've worked with on several cases.
You don't have to imagine. You don't have to imagine. That's the fact. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Former prosecutor, state and federal. That's the fact. I do work with these guys, and you have to divide that line if you have the courage to do it.
Exactly. So you have to wonder whether or not that influences the strength of their presentation, and whether they are going all out or not. And like you said, and then the grand jury is going to take their cue from the prosecutor who's presenting the case. And so, it's quite disappointing. Class D felony, the exposure there is 1 to 5 years. We're not really sure at this time. I mean, I haven't done the in-depth research. Maybe we could follow up. I don't know if you have, Royce, as to whether that's going to, if they do get a conviction, whether on all 3 counts, whether that would be consecutive or concurrent, meaning.
Well, I'll chime in on that. I mean,
okay.
There is a possibility that it could be consecutive, because the counts are, to my understanding, and we'll get into this, is related to the victims that could have been endangered. Now, remember, Hackinson, his gunfire did not kill Breonna Taylor, did not hit her. Sergeant Mattingly, his gunfire is the gunfire that killed her. So Hackinson, his gunfire went through the wall through into a neighbor's apartment where there was a woman, I think her daughter, and a child. Hence the 3 counts, I'm assuming, for which his actions of firing his gun showed indifference to human life or serious physical injury that could cause death. So it's not even really related and tied to Breonna Taylor in the way that we would think, because we would think that Mattingly, the sergeant who gunfire actually killed her, would be in the loop and charged with that. But that is not the case. And in New York City, when you talk about relationships between police officers and the assistant district attorneys, if assistant district attorneys in New York City are hesitant to move forward against police officers, or if the DA is not really diversifying the presentation of the assistants that go in that speak to the grand jury, or someone is hesitant, if that can happen in New York, where there's thousands of officers, and there is a good chance that you may not see that officer again for several years, that in a smaller place like Louisville or Kentucky, a smaller place like that, that there is more of a pressure and more of an allegiance and more of a getting to know one another than it is in New York. So therefore the ramifications of quote unquote putting one of your own in jail because people see the prosecutor and police as the same is immense. And so you can have something like this happen quite easily.
Just like you did in Ahmaud Arbery. It took so long to charge him because of all of those conflicts of interest and different prosecutors saying, oh no, I know him and this and that. I mean, it's awful. The other news that I'd like to inform the audience of, if they aren't aware, is my understanding is from one of the tweets, I believe, is that bail was set at $15,000 for Officer Hankerson. So I would imagine that he's going to be able to make bail and be free. The other 2 officers, the only thing that's happened to them who were not charged is that they were administratively reassigned, but they still have their jobs and they haven't otherwise been disciplined. This is a real disappointment.
And Hankerson is appealing his being fired.
Yep.
Get back on the job.
And they're basically having vacation during this time because nothing has happened. And there was a question that Richard had, is there a difference between the classes? in those.
Yeah, I think I know what he's talking about in reference to class level E or class level D or class level
Severity.
C felony. You take the classes and the level of ed said the severity, the amount of time that you would spend in jail may increase depending upon the class. In New York, A is the highest, B it comes next, and C, then D, then E. That may not necessarily be the case in every state. So, like in New Jersey, they have first degree, second degree, third degree, and fourth degree. And, you know, in that state, fourth degree might be a higher charge. It depends upon the state. So, the D felony 1 to 5, I'm sure with most D felonies, there is an area where you can show mitigation and it could get dropped down to E felony. And therefore, with the E felony, you can get probation. I'm not saying that would happen in this case, but in New York, there are provisions for that. And if Kentucky's case law is analogous to New York and penal law is analogous to New York, there's a possibility that can happen. And I just find it amazing that the officers that actually killed Breonna is walking away. And I know it's going to be this theory of who shot first. So if the sergeant shot second, then all he knows is that shots are being fired and it's friendly fire necessarily. But I just find that totally amazing. What was the deciding factor in that? And a lot of people are saying, oh, the FBI is still investigating. Look, if the FBI was going to take over this case, they would have took over this case. The FBI is investigating for systemic racism within the police force or some other way to deal with the biases, implicit or otherwise, that exists. Because if they wanted these officers, they would have scooped them and nobody would have been able to touch them.
And that's the reality. I think it's insulting to think that the world, once again, is watching in real time and not seeing what's happening. The bait and switch, the smoke and mirrors. Like the bullets that killed Breonna Taylor came from one gun. Everybody knows what gun that came with, but that person walks away. I just explain to us what you think tactic-wise is happening here, because there was a settlement. So is that affecting what now has come out as an indictment because there was a settlement that was done before?
Well, it's interesting. It seems like, these folks are trying to, I believe the mayor made a statement that, I believe it's Mayor Fisher, that he didn't know what the outcome was going to be of what happened in the grand jury. But, a lot of us observers.
I gotta stop you there. Right? I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I hear what you're saying. If you're a leader, you have a pulse on what's going on. Your assistants can come back and say, boss, it don't look good for the home team. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've stepped in the kitchen when my wife is doing my daughter's hair and I hear the yelling. I'm like, oh, I need to step back out. You know what I'm saying? It don't look good for the home team, right? So we know this. So that's bullshit, right? What is also bullshit is that we know that if there's any, or at least I know, if there's a settlement that happens, everybody knows. And for better or for worse, it does relieve a sense of anxiety, and it does put people in a different place as far as has justice been served. That is not directed towards the Taylor family. I'm just saying people in general. You'll hear arguments that, oh, she got her money, what's she worried about? Or they got their money. You hear ignorant arguments like that. But what is not so ignorant is that the state knows this and knows that, yes, this person was paid out. That part is over. No matter how much protests take place, we have this one thing to deal with, and we can leave it up to the jurors to deal with it. We don't necessarily have to take that on ourselves. And if we just put a little effort, we can say that we put effort.
And I think you're absolutely correct. They had an idea that this was going to go down this way. They went ahead and settled the case ahead of time, I believe, to the tune of $12 million.
Yes.
They, and then you interestingly have the mayor and the city start boarding up windows in the downtown and
Right.
talking about curfew for the anticipated protests. And so, kind of the second part of this show, we wanted to talk a little bit about this whole issue of protests, kind of in association with this, because, you got the city of Louisville, I believe earlier this week, they were showing the wooden boards on the windows and so forth, and them anticipating that, people are going to really, react possibly violently to, this grand jury verdict or what came out of it.
And why would we acknowledge something that we don't know what the conclusion is? One, so that's how we know it's bullshit, right? And two, why would we act violent if the conclusion is that everyone is charged with, like, there's one academic argument that says, oh, they could have been charged with more, right? And there is another argument that they weren't charged at all. Which one you think the walls need to be boarded up and stores need to be shut down, right? The one where they're not charged at all. Folks are not running around here protesting based on academia, based upon whether it was first degree or second degree. That's not what's happening. So they know this and they know what's going on. And this is the hand that we've been dealt, the raw hand. And we've always been dealt the raw hand.
Now, one of the issues here that coincides with some of this is recently, within the past week, Attorney General Barr came out with a pronouncement that the federal government is looking to charge protesters with sedition. Mm-hmm. Now, what is sedition? Okay, now I'm going to read to you what sedition is. It's a federal charge. It's basically a charge that you're trying to overthrow the government. And it's found under 18 U.S. Code Section 2384. It's specifically entitled seditious conspiracy.
Correct.
And the wording here is, if two or more persons in any state or territory or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both.
And add on to that, Ed, I've seen language that said that sedition is speech attacking basic institutions of government. What is a basic institution of government? Policing, right? That's what we're really talking about, and or government, government leaders, right? So when you hear all this talk from the president about policing, and we need to be heavy on policing, you hear all the talk about Barr, about having a anarchist state, New York.
Yeah, we're in an anarchist city.
To that, right? Anarchist state, which means that, New York is just full with violence, and trying to make the correlation between what is happening on a street level, street violence, which has always been an uptick in the summertime, and try to make the correlation that goes hand in hand with protests, which is talking about stop violence against brown and black people. Oh, you really got a real mixture there. Are we really trying to use the sliding scale and semantics in defining what is seditious speech and what is not? As you said, it's the overthrow. It is the violent actions. It is the physical actions, similar to treason, right? Treason, you have to physically do something. With sedition, you have to verbally say something that we're going to overthrow something. I don't hear that when I'm at these protests, when I'm representing folks. I hear doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Listen, they're going to have quite a hill to climb if they try to charge protesters with, sedition. I think the case law is pretty clear that the speech has to be matched by actual action, or at the very least, there has to be some activity that indicates that the action is likely to be produced. I mean, one of the major cases to look at is back in the 30s, a number of Puerto Rican nationalists that were in support of the independence of Puerto Rico. One of them, namely the leader, Pedro Albizu Campos, Harvard graduate, famous, died in prison for the cause of the independence of Puerto Rico. Him and about 10 other people were charged with this and actually got acquitted because the government was trying to basically charge them purely on speech. And in a recent case in 2010 by the Eastern District of Michigan, U.S. v. Stone, in 2010, the court said hate-filled, venomous speech is a right that deserves First Amendment protection, because in that case, they were talking about a group called the Hutari, who were an extremist, I believe, white nationalist group out there in Michigan. The government had been looking at them for about 2 years, and they were training people for some sort of, ultimate, action. And it said imminent lawless action likely to produce such action. That's basically the standard. The government is going to really have to prove that, first of all, 2 or more persons. It's not just one person. They have to basically be talking about a group, and that this group is not just engaging in speech, but also engaging that action that's going to likely produce that ultimate result of this, overthrow, putting down, or destroying by force the government.
So,
and
let me just jump in, because one, we have a question from someone that's listening, and then the article that we're referencing where Barr is talking about this whole movement that he's trying to create, the Antifa. That's what he's using as a powerful movement, organized and causing a lot of the problems. So he's trying to color that it's Antifa that he's after. And then we had a question from Stacey Bolton Gibson that says, do you really think that they're waiting to arrest peaceful protesters?
So
that's the key. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. I'll add my 2 cents, and you add your 10 cents on top of it. My 2 cents is this: who is they? Who is they? That's number one. If they is equal to police, and is they equal to police that may get overtime by arresting protesters, and they are police who get overtime by arresting protesters, which means more money in their paycheck, then the answer could be a resounding yes. Could be a resounding yes. Now, how do we define peaceful? You're talking about someone's employment. You're talking about reforming the way somebody does business. I would think that that's peaceful, but some people might think that it's threatening. Quite frankly, because the way they're arresting people and giving tickets, I believe that they think it's threatening. And to your point as to speaking to sedition and words mixed with action, those that are out there protesting, you need to really think about the words, because now we're giving you the information for which one might be trying to do something. I'm not saying you shouldn't do something, but that there is entity out there. There is a portion of the population that's trying to criminalize free speech, and you just need to know that. That's all. You just need to know. I don't want it to be a surprise. And being prepared, being empowered, and having a plan is not being surprised. It's having the ability to know that this is going to go down.
So I think part of what we're also doing with this show, which I'm just so proud of the fact that we started it in the middle of COVID as a way to just have conversations around legal issues that affect our communities. And in real time, we've been watching history unfold right in front of our eyes. And we've been able to address it with 2 experts who do this every single day, with a client roster that unfortunately continues to increase because of these issues that we're seeing. And I think one of the things that all of us need to be mindful of, who is directing the narrative? Because there's some interesting narratives that are out there, and you have to fact check, right?
Yes.
You don't fact check. then you start to believe twisted narratives, but the truth doesn't need defending. The truth is the truth. So no matter how long it takes for it to come out, no matter how long we have to fight for the truth is the truth. But there are competing narratives that are taking people's time, energy, and attention. And here's my concern. Folks are tired. They're getting fatigued with seeing certain things. And we know our mutual friend, Dr. Jeff Gardere, that talks about what can happen if you get desensitized to the kind of violence that's happening to Black America, that, oh, here it happens again. Oh, it's just again. So there are levels of trauma that we have experienced in real time in exponential way in 2020. It's not new to the Black and brown community, but it's happening in such a concentrated, accelerated pace in this year that we have to be responsible with what we consume, fact check the information, who is shaping and shifting the narrative so that the real America can show up. Because I still have faith that it's not the majority of Americans who believe in some of these twisted narratives. I still believe that we have enough people in these states, the United States, not the United Snakes of America, as some people call it. We still have some people with some sense up here that can fact check, that can check the narrative, and can advocate that we live in a country where everybody has equal access to opportunities and a fair trial, and to be able to have attorneys like Mr. Russell and Mr. Pichardo that can defend when necessary. So I just needed to get that out there.
Well, listen, in response to the question, peaceful protest is protected under the law, okay? Peaceful protest, all right? Now, there's some parameters to it and some details we can discuss, but on its surface, it's legal. Under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. You have the right to assemble. That's when we're talking about protest, you have the right, the basic right to assemble. Freedom of speech, you have the right to speak your mind. And some people don't understand also that when you talk about New York has its own constitution as well, which also backs that up under the Article 1 Bill of Rights. It says no law under Section 9, no law shall be passed abridging the rights of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government. Okay, you know, so on its basic surface, you have a right to protest peaceably. When you start getting into issues is when you start talking about embracing some level of violence, okay? And what I warn a lot of the folks out there on a cultural level is that, and this is published and well documented, during the 60s and 70s, when there was a lot of turmoil and violent protests in the country, you know, a lot of groups that were otherwise peaceful were infiltrated by agents of the government who inserted into the minds of otherwise peaceful protesters to start embracing violent means, and then they would later turn around and get those people arrested and you know and come up with charges and say, well, listen, and it even happens even today. There are cases of several individuals, particularly I believe in Minnesota, who, you know, in these terrorism cases, who are sitting in prison now saying, well, listen, you know, one day this guy approached me. He talked about me doing my duty, that he had the guns and the other weaponry, and that I just needed to meet with him, and that we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And next thing you know, the cops are sitting there waiting for us. And, you know, and I'm the one getting prosecuted here. And there have been issues there about whether or not, you know, these were individuals who truly acted or whether they were pushed to act. And so individuals who are involved right now and protesting need to be careful that they don't involve themselves in situations where their peaceful, otherwise peaceful protesting can then be classified as violent and then be charged with, you know, a violent offense. And you know, and listen, I talked about the freedom of speech, but you also have to be careful when you start talking about associating protests with violence. You know, that kind of talk can get very strange and put you into some dangerous territory about you possibly being, prosecuted later. I worked with several unions in the labor movement, and one of the normal activities by a lot of unions is, protesting and picketing. If you're doing the building trades, a lot of them picket employers who are doing construction projects that are non-union. You also have other workers, even, city workers who will protest something that takes place with respect to the city. They might otherwise have a rally in support of a new contract, like the transit workers. You have a lot of, it's a protest-filled arena, and some of the things that you need to think about is that you have that right to assemble, that right to protest, that can't be taken away from you. But you have to make sure that it's free of fraud, of violence, that you're not breaching the peace, that you're not trespassing upon property, private property, that you're not obstructing ingress or egress. And what I mean by that is sometimes I would get called to a picket, and the guys I'm working with are saying, listen, the police aren't letting us even hold up signs here or protest. And then I have to talk to the cop, and I have to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, they can't stand out here. What do you mean they can't stand out here? Well, one time it was in front of a hospital. This is a hospital, and it's going to disturb the patients. And I said, wait a minute, hold on a second. These guys are a reasonable distance, because it's about reasonable. They're a reasonable distance from the entrance. They're not blocking the sidewalk. They're not blocking the entrance of this establishment. They're simply engaging in their First Amendment right to call attention to this employer who's engaging in a dangerous non-union construction project here. And we're allowed to do that. And in that time, that instance, the police officer gets on the phone. I'm going to call corporation counsel, and they happen to be a female cop. And then she comes back. Well, I could stop this from happening, but she told me it's up to me, so I'll let you guys continue doing.
Yeah, it is.
And I was like, yeah, right. What happened was the city lawyer told me you can't stop them from fulfilling their rights. Are they hurting anybody? Are they threatening anybody? Are they blocking the sidewalk? No. Now, when I talk about the blocking the sidewalk, ingress and egress, if you got a large enough crowd, and also you're not supposed to block the streets too, because you're not supposed to block traffic. If you think that your protest or your rally is going to be large enough where there's going to be a lot of people, then at that point, you need to consider contacting the police department, talking about, a permit, and doing it, that way, so that you can, legally do what you need to do. But overall, you have the right to protest. You have the right to assemble, and that can't be taken away from you. You just got to make sure that all of the people who are participating understand you can't engage in intimidation. You can't engage in abusive and insulting language. You can't do the threats you try to stay away from anything that's false or misleading, because you also have two issues that go on too. You want to make sure nobody violates the criminal law, but also if you're an organization, a legitimate organization, you also don't want to subject yourself to any sort of injunction or lawsuit. And so, those are the things that you want to kind of look at when you're talking about doing a protest action. And
Ed, so let me just add or try to summarize a little bit, because you said a lot and it's all important information. And if our listeners can take away one thing, and this is going to sound crazy, right? Because what I'm about to say is walking contradiction. Practical protest. Well, damn, Royce, if we going to protest, how can it be practical, right? I mean, that's the first thing that comes in my mind. But if you listen to everything that Senor Pichardo has said in reference to protesting and how to proceed, there has to be some practicality to it. And what do I mean by that? One, practicality in having a plan and knowing that, hey, look, if we're going to block the sidewalk and we're going to block the streets, folks are going to get arrested. That's one, practical. Two is there is no harm in getting a permit to have a protest. I'm down with the pop-up protest. I'm down with the spontaneity. It all means good, feels good, and it shocks the system and it shocks the world. However, if you get a permit and you have the protest, and the protest is, or the rally is phenomenal in getting the message across and heard, then it was a good moment in time. It's not belittled because you actually had to dot an I or cross the T to get a permit. It is what is being said and what is being heard during the rally or the protest. So that's a little bit of the practicality in protesting. And you also need to be mindful that you can't control everything. So you need to have some attorneys on retainer. So when things go south, go bad, you can make a call. And you need to understand, as Ed said, there's always going to be infiltrators. There's always going to be people that is going to use your agenda for their agenda. And they're going to try to co-opt your message by showing up at your rally that you put together to try to get their message. So there needs to be one mic, and you need to control that one mic. Mm-hmm. Who's that one mic going to? Do you have a relationship with that person that's going to handle that one mic? There's nothing wrong with having a relationship with that person that's going to handle that one mic. So you can say what you want to say and get your point across. Look, the dictionary is filled with words that can be used in void of other words, like the word reform. I'm not saying overthrow, I'm saying reform, right? The words that we're not going to take it anymore. I'm not saying that I'm going to do something violent, but I know I'm not going to take it anymore. So we can use the dictionary to our advantage. And I say this not only to our listeners that might be older in experience, but to the young folks out there, organizations like Breathe, other organizations where you got 16, 15, 17, 18-year-old kids out here grabbing the mic and standing up for themselves, who may not have been educated in the area of what is acceptable and what is not. And they might get the benefit of the doubt because they're kids, but they may not.
Right. So I think that you both raised a lot. I mean, today's show was jam-packed, so definitely share it out. Follow us, come and tune into the show every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But there's some key things that you said that I want to highlight when it comes to protesting peacefully. And thank you, Ed, for, going through what you can and you can't do, because there's a way to do everything. And what Royce just shared as well, you'll have people that try to infiltrate when you do the right thing. So you have to really understand that there is a way to organize a protest, whether it's impromptu, whether you get a permit, that you control the mic, you control the narrative and the actions best you can of those who are there. We did a protest in Queens when this was in April. When did we do it? June. It was still early on in COVID. So there were a lot of things that have changed that we also have to be cognizant of when we're protesting. COVID-19 has not gone away. So there are certain protocols that should be in place, but we contacted the local police department. So we're not saying every single police officer is horrible. No, we're going to call out the bad actors and we're not going to take it anymore. Reform means we need to get rid of those who make a bad showing for law enforcement, who get up each and every day to really serve and protect our communities. And those who have no desire to really honor what that means and just take people's lives because of the color of their skin and making assumptions, that's another story that we have to attack. But in our community, we contacted the police department. We told them what we wanted to do. They made themselves accessible. We had to deal with 2 different precincts because we were marching a longer distance. They came, they showed up, they helped to direct traffic. They escorted us down to the rally. So we were able to gather peacefully, use our First Amendment right, speak our minds, control our microphone and our narrative, and have people participate who are lending their voices to change. So it can be done, but you have to realize in the community who you're working with and be aware that Antifa or whoever else will try to plant people in peaceful protest so that the media can say, oh, look at them. They're just rioting. They're just burning everything down. This is violent. And that's not how it started. So going back to what I said before, fact check. Understand that we have the enemy in our midst. So be careful. We're not telling you not to do it, but we're saying if you're going to gather peacefully, make sure that you know best you can, how you're moving, who's there, who you're aligned with, so that it can't fall back negatively on any of the organizers and or the participants. Young people have a whole lifetime ahead of them. We don't want to see them with criminal records that could prevent them from living a full life that they were intended to live. So,
and I just want to,
you all go back.
I just want to mention, piggyback on what Roy said. I don't have a personal issue when people make the decision to engage in a level of protest that gets them arrested. Okay.
Yeah, right.
What I would say is that if you're going to do that, make sure you plan it well.
That's right.
Make sure you achieve, you're looking to achieve the ends that you're looking to achieve, that you do it well, that you let your lawyers know when it's going to take place so that they can then, show up at the precinct, figure out what's going on, try to get you out of there. Or if the plan is to go through arraignment, so be it, but make sure that you're organized in what you do. And that you're fully aware of the consequences, okay? I've worked with groups who, hey, listen, one member of the group might say, hey, listen, guys, I can't do that because right now I'm still on probation from the last protest where we got arrested. And so, the group says, nah, you good, man. Don't worry about this. It's our turn now. The attorney is contacted. He's there observing from a distance and okay, and he goes up and he talks to the cops and says, well, where are you taking my client? Oh, we're going to take him to the precinct. What's the plan here? Well, we got to do the background check, but we're pretty sure we're just going to give a DAT. Okay, fine. Or, if something gets complicated, they have your number, you're in contact. Things are organized. And that's the key, making sure what you're doing is organized, okay? Because you do have rights to engage in a certain level of protest. And the question is to what level you're going to take it, because listen.
Organizing does not mean not spontaneous. I mean, they can walk hand in hand. It just means exactly what you said. Know the members within your group to have an understanding that today I can't do this, but tomorrow I can. And who's going to carry the mantle at any particular time? Or are we going to carry this certain mantle? Understand who is on the microphone or who you're giving the microphone to a degree. You can't stop everything. We're not in a perfect world. And once again, spontaneity is very fruitful and it gets the message across. However, nobody should be participating in a protest without knowing what the end result could be. And when I listen to some of the people that have come to me because they've been caught up in a protest, I really know that there is a cultural divide. It's similar when we had 9/11 and our folks would be in search at the airport and some other folks would be in search at the airport. Our folks were like, all right, go get finished doing the search. This is protocol, wave the wand. And then there was other folks that were outraged. Like, what are you doing? You waving a wand, I'm being searched. What you find in the protest and in the protesting is that the other folks are now being subject to the inhumane treatment that we've been subject to without being a part of a protest just in our daily lives. And so now they're like, oh my God, this is going on. And I need a lawyer. And all I was doing was just standing there. Yeah.
So
what you doing was standing there. So was I.
So that is a great cultural point to put in as we're rounding out the show. I want to get to Richard's question. We're not going to have time to go into it in detail, but he was talking about, can trauma be formed by continued abuse in the Black community and cause a development of some sort of PTSD, or has that been developed? So I'll give you a quick answer. We might want to bring our friend Dr. Jeff Gardier on, but Dr. Jai DeGru, she talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome. Yeah, it's real, Richard. Like what we're experiencing, what we're going through, we're not making this up. That's a whole nother show to get into, the trauma that we experience. And that's something that we'll sit and talk amongst ourselves about, bringing some of these experts on who deal with this from a psychological way and understanding what happens from the babies all the way up to the elders in our community that have.
Well, Dr. Grant, that question that was posed by Mr. Russell was just not a question that he didn't know the answer to, by the way, right? Because this is a man, I know him personally, that grew up in the projects, right? And so he know that Project PST exists, right? So he know that growing up in a certain environment you have thoughts about what it is growing up in that environment. So even when you leave that environment, those thoughts still go with you. So when you step in the elevator, if you grew up in New York City housing, where if you stepped in the elevator, anything can happen at any given time. You could get robbed, you could walk into the middle of a fight, anything can happen. That when you step in the elevator as a person that is older, that is away from that environment, you still have thoughts of that. When you're riding your bike and you've seen people get hit by cars and riding a bike, and you're in the suburbs and no cars are around, you're still riding with the thought that, wait a minute, a car could come out of nowhere, or an animal could come out of nowhere. So yes, I the reason why I bring that up is because that simple analogy, that simple experience is what we're talking about when you talk about seeing Black lives lost on a daily, and the desensitization that goes on when you could say, you know what, that's just the man kicking the dog again. Let me get finished watching the Lakers game. You know what I mean? That it is intentional. It is
and I used to be the chief of youth diversion at the Brooklyn DA's office, and I ran some programs for a lot of primarily young Black men, and I can attest to the fact that a lot of the young men in our community are actually, traumatized, in some cases desensitized to unhealthy levels of violence, where a certain level of violence is normalized. With the stuff that they've seen is just in some cases horrific or very disturbing. It's no mystery that a lot of individuals in our communities of color, are in need of some level of counseling or therapy. And in fact, I would say that, and I think this is backed up by the data and the studies, that some of this trauma worsens with age.
Yes,
a lot of times, young people are resilient, but over time, the older you get, even now, sometimes certain images, because I grew up in the project, certain images just pop up into my mind of things that I haven't thought about that happened probably about 40 years ago. And I'm like, oh, snap, why am I thinking about that right now? What triggered that,
Why you open up a door and somebody's in front of you and you ready to fight? You're like, oh, wait a minute, where did I come from? Why you say, hey, look, you know what? I can deal with somebody shooting guns, but if you have a deer run by me or a possum or a raccoon, you're like, yo, what the hell is that? You ready to jump on the chair. So, yeah.
But to push it, I knew that Richard knew the answer to that, but I wanted to bring that up because this is important for us to talk about. And I think that is a future show topic, and we'll have special guests. We've done special guests before. I think it's time to bring in a special guest because of the level of trauma that we're experiencing. So I want to thank all of you for tuning in. So many folks have been very active in our chats today. Thank you, Shawnee. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Captain Nadira Brown. We appreciate you being here and being a part of the show today. So time goes by so fast on Speaking Legally. There's a lot to talk about. The news is happening in real time. History is unfolding right before our eyes, but we want to break it down as we go through each and every subject matter that we cover on the show. Share it with somebody. You can catch the replays, of course, on the pages that you're viewing now and on the Destiny Designers TV YouTube. But important business. Countdown. Oh, well, first of all, happy birthday to all those who are Virgos and you're enjoying the last days of being a Virgo.
We got a birthday coming up on this show right here. Wait. We got a birthday coming up like Saturday. Like, isn't that Saturday or something like that? Yeah, it's your birthday. It's your birthday. Who's your daddy? Who's your mama? It's your birthday. Who's your daddy? Who's your mama? Who's your daddy?
So we're gonna be this is for us. Leave the season is starting. So Ed is the 26th. I'm 10-4. The party continues. So that's just a little levity. We talked about a lot of heavy stuff today, but we're grateful to see another birthday, to have another year. God spare our lives on our respective days. But we really appreciate you being here, being a part of the show, that the value that our two expert attorneys bring to this show is priceless. So you're getting consultations without a price tag. You're understanding what's going on legally in our communities. You can share information. I mean, when I think about how you broke down probation, parole, talking about protests, if you get arrested, the plan to get arrested. There's so many levels that this show needs to be broadly distributed so that more people can have access to attorneys like Edward Pichardo Esquire and Royce Russell Esquire. And of course, go on and get your copy of Cardiac Arrest if you have it, a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops. So thank you all for your commentary, your attendance here today. I'm going to give my two co-hosts their final words before we wrap up today's show.
Well, once again, thank you for viewing our show. You know, we really appreciate you as the audience. Just wanted to make a quick mention with respect to the, jury duty and jury service for the city, municipal workers here in New York City, and some of the transit government workers. I believe that the city pays you your full salary while you serve on jury duty. So that shouldn't be a deterrence for serving. You just have to make sure you get the documentation that you were actually serving on the jury and you're covered. So, I just wanted to, drop that jewel there and say peace.
Hey, I just want to make sure I wish Senior Pichardo a happy birthday, because birthdays come around once in a few. And when you have them, you got to take them. And Stacey, we'll get to you next week because we know your birthday is up and rising and rolling. But your birthday lasts like a whole month. So, it just takes a day. It just takes a day or two. You got the whole month. But once again, thank you everybody for attending. You know where to find us, R Square ESQ, Ed Pichardo ESQ. We're all over. And I want to say something, Dr. Grant. We are ahead of our time because every time we have a subject matter, either just after or just before something pops off that deals with our subject matter. I spoke about Rochester on a couple of episodes. Now, Rochester, we're coming. We's are coming to Rochester. So those who know won't tell. Those who tell don't know. And so let's be safe. Talk to you later.
See you next week, everyone.